We're here in Morocco to look at a new product for Eco Outdoor, which is called Zelige, which is a traditional Moroccan handmade clay tile. You can see all the tiles here behind me, and I've got a few here. So this tile's actually originated in the Andalusia region of Spain about over 1,000 years ago, and the Andalusians brought this tile to Morocco, and it's now being used all through Morocco in traditional architecture, and it's been exported around the world. But the factory that we're in now is the only factory in the whole of Morocco that's making these tiles by hand in the traditional way. And I'll sort of walk you around the factory and show you a bit of the processes. So you can see it's not a massive factory, but there's quite a lot of action here. There's probably about 50 people working here today. So the process starts with the clay, which is just in a massive pile over here to my right. So from this pile, the clay gets loaded onto this conveyor belt where it gets refined into a very fine powder. And then that powder is placed in these big pits that you can see around me. And they basically add water to these pits, and the clay will absorb and amalgamate with the water. And from there, we load the clay into a mold on the floor, which you can see over here. Laid out into a mold, and that sits on the floor for 2 days to dry out, at which point it's loaded onto these sort of drying racks and moved on to the next stage of the process. The next part of the process is from the tiles drying out on the floor after 2 days, they're then brought over here, and they're still quite soft. And from here, this is Saeed, and he's demonstrating, they get hammered into a flat shape and then cut to size. Being hammered into a flat tile and cut, they're left on the racks for about a day, and then they move on to the next stage of the process, which is being baked in the kiln. They're just removing a batch out of the kiln now. So they're baked for about 9 hours at about 900 degrees. And when that comes out, you've just got the raw sort of biscuit, the natural finish, which is used. But for the tiles that are going to have a colour and a glaze, they go through a final process before they're ready. So the next stage of the process for the glazed tiles is they get the raw tile and they just wet the top surface, and from there you can see this gentleman here, he's dipping it in a mixture of pigment and water, and from there it gets loaded into these racks and loaded into the kiln for a second baking. Now, depending on the colour that they're producing, the temperature's baked at about 1200 degrees, but depending on the colour, because there's a reaction with the pigment and the firing, so you've got different temperatures or different lengths of time depending on the colour that you're producing. So just to sort of summarise a few things, because we've got a lot going on here. So this is the natural biscuit, the clay tile before it's had a glaze on it, and they are sold in that before any other stages of production. But where we're up to is with the glazed tile. So this is the white glazed tile, we saw the pile over there before. This has now come out of the kiln, and it's got a sort of beautiful smooth texture to it. But the next stage of the process is it's got to go from this to this. So basically the tile's got to go through a calibrating machine, and that's the only stage of the process where there's a machine involved rather than the human hand, and it gets cut down to 100 mil by 100 mil. And then they also hand chip the back of the tile, which allows for, and I'll explain this a bit later, it allows to get much tighter grout joints. The next part of the process is it's got to be cut down to size. So from this about 110 by 110, it gets come down to 100 by 100 mil. So you can see this is actually the production line that we're watching at the moment is actually a special size that they're producing for a chain of perfume stores where they're doing an unusual size. But you can see the process where she's actually loading the raw pre-cut tile onto a mold, and then it gets loaded into this calibrating machine and gets cut down to size. so this is the final stage of the production of the Zelige tile. So this is the hand chipping, and Saeed here is just chipping the edges of the tile. So what that actually does is, when it comes out of the calibrating machine and it's just cut, it's just a flat tile. But by chipping the edges, when you're gluing the tile to the wall, it means that the glue, rather than pushing up and separating the tiles, and you get like, say, a 3 to 5 mil join, by chipping the tile, it means that you can get much closer joints on the tiles, up to like under 1 millimeter. So it's very, very, very tight. So this is the final stage of the process.